Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, a few times in the past week, I've talked to various people about the rise of populism, I suppose, in various democracies, most notably US, UK, and France right now, and how we can turn this around here. And as coincidence would have it, I talked about one aspect of this on the Sunday Roast programme last week. I'll put a link in the description below if you've not seen it yet. And then I see that Keir Starmer is echoing largely the same point. But first, just to point out, if there's any mad breaking news today, I won't be covering it until tomorrow. I'm in hospital all day today having my head stabbed. So that'll be nice. So everything today was done yesterday. But anyway, dealing with populism. My argument was this. Populism feeds on two things, hate and privations. Now, the hate is tricky to deal with. Haters gonna hate and all that. But there are only so many genuinely hateful people in any society, not enough to sweep to power. The biggest group of vulnerable voters you need to connect with are those who are suffering privations. We know how populists do it. Your job is crap, your housing is crap, you can't access public services, and it's all because of this thing. It's usually immigrants. It's something. It's not the billionaires nicking all the money and trickling nothing down. Oh, no. It's the immigrants. Even though without immigration, there would be nowhere near enough people staffing those public services or building those houses because our domestic population isn't growing enough to sustain our retired population. But that won't cut any ice. People won't believe you. Any political argument which requires you to use a graph is doomed to failure. So my argument has been, it's hard to argue these points with people. Populists say your standard of living is bad because of immigrants. You can try and argue that it's not, but you're going to lose because you're not peddling the easy answers. So what to do? Remove the arguments altogether. The populists can't blame immigrants for your lack of access to decent housing if you have access to decent housing. They can't blame immigrants for lack of access to public services if your access to public services is good. They also won't get a handle on asylum if the visible markers disappear. Farage and his ilk have been using small boat crossings and migrant hotels as a rallying call. They didn't used to exist. Once we don't have the channel crossings, once we don't need the hotels for accommodation, those visible signs of what the populists call a crisis melt away. They will still be able to get the haters to hate, because haters going to hate. But the more reasonable people whose lives were just crap and they just wanted someone to improve it quickly, the populists lose their grip on those. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but the solution to populism always has to be remove the problems in people's lives that populists blame on immigrants or some other spurious issues. And there is nothing profound about this. History shows that populism marches in lockstep with privations. The far right are rising in France. Why? Because although Macron's done well on the international stage, he has made a complete arse of it domestically. And the left have struggled to organise themselves as the credible alternative. The populists are on the march again in America because the political establishment kept doing the bare minimum for ordinary people. And then, do you know what? That bare minimum was all of a sudden no longer enough because along came the orange one and said, this is rubbish. You should have better. And do you know what? He didn't have to tell too many lies when he first became president. He was telling the truth when he said the established political order had let Americans down. He only lied about not being way worse himself. So if populism throughout the world and throughout history always marches in step with people suffering lower than expected standards of living, then the obvious counter is to raise that standard of living with established politics, conventional politics, so that people don't have to take a punt on populists. And by happy coincidence, I was pottering, reading some articles, and I came across a piece in The Guardian where the headline quotes Keir Starmer saying, "You deal with populism by making people's lives better." He goes on to say that populism exists where people are disaffected by politics and believe you can't trust politicians, which is exactly right. You don't defeat it by arguing, doesn't work with populists. Populists offer the easy answers, no drawbacks. People like that. The populist is like the proverbial pigeon you play chess with, who knocks over all the pieces, craps on the board and then struts around like it won. Now, just because Keir Starmer says this doesn't mean we can all just relax, put our feet up, crack a beer open and drink to the end of populism. Hurrah! Keir Starmer isn't a secret political genius. His performance in interviews and some of the debates is evidence of that. It's an obvious enough solution, but it's also one that surely other more experienced political leaders around the world have also been aware of, and yet they haven't stemmed the tide of populism in their own country. Biden has spent his term going hell for leather, making people's lives better, but he hasn't convinced enough people. The evidence is there, but so too is the populism still. And so Starmer will also face the same problems. He's keen on Bidenomics, that sort of style of revival for the UK. A complete U-turn from the Tory top-down approach. Biden calls it bottom-up and middle-out. That's what Labour are going for. But going for it and recognising that this is how you defeat populism by making people's lives better, it's not a guarantee of success, but there are reasons for optimism in the UK. The first is that Starmer being so open about this strategy bodes well. It means we're in no doubt at all about two things. Starmer recognises the threat of populism because he's taken it head on, and he has explicitly stated how you cut the feet from under it. Second, the UK is not as polarised as the US. Trump has benefited from retaining a lot of his own loonies, as well as the support of those tribal voters who will just stick with the Republicans whomever they nominate. We don't have that in the UK. If you shit the bed, voters will abandon you. The Tories could end up with only about half the votes they won just 5 years ago. Now, if that actually happens, that will be a mad crash of support, which speaks to the fact the UK is thankfully not as toxically tribal as America. Third, the populists are not going to be getting power in the UK for a generation at least. Labour have time. The Conservatives have got two choices. They either rebuild or they carry on down the populist route themselves. They can't do both. Reform UK will crow over their vote share, but it's worth approximately zero political power. Farage reckons he'll be the real voice of the opposition. No, you won't, mate. Hopefully Ed Davey will, but it will not be Farage. Fourth, one of the big benefits of having people like Starmer and Reeves take this project on is they're not career politicians. Politicians are useful. You need them. It's good that there are some experienced ones at the top of the party. But, there's just too many of them. They just go to university, do that shit PPE course at Oxford. And then they all have the same sort of thinking style. They all have this group think. So they pursue a career of orthodoxy without ever really considering if it's all bollocks. One advantage of having Starmer and Reeves, who both have a string of real achievements, which are rare enough with those from their backgrounds, is that they've been driven to achievement. They've been driven to achievement against the odds. Now, it's impossible to do what they've done without them challenging orthodoxy, recognising the need to do some things differently. They didn't pursue their pre-parliamentary careers by following the established order. We don't want a Dominic Cummings do things differently for the sake of being different, do mental shit attitude, obviously. But having people who can look at a problem and then think, hang on a minute, that doesn't work. We'll try something else. Not allowing barriers to solve it because, we don't do things like that. That could be a bit of a game changer. You look at France. What is the problem in France? It is that Macron has failed domestically. So what's the alternative? The left haven't organised themselves and said, we have got this alternative. So people have gone to the far right. It's really that simple. At the moment in the UK, we still have that time because people are willing to give Labour a chance. So we're going to have to be cautious about the potential rise of populism. My greatest fear is for populism to win. Like I've just said, those alternatives have to be seen to fail. People don't just instantly turn to populism. It's like, are there credible alternatives first? In the UK, Labour was seen to fail after the banking crisis. They didn't, but they were seen to fail. And then the Tories were seen to fail with austerity. The result, Brexit. Now we're halfway through another cycle. The Tories they're seen as failed. They have failed. And do you know what? That is baked in now. I don't see the Tories restoring their reputation for a very long time to come. So people are now looking to Labour as their only conventional alternative. If they fail, you cannot rule out people thinking, well, maybe Farage has the answers after all, just like they did in 2016. So Labour must not fail. But it is heartening to see that Starmer recognises the situation, that he acknowledges the risks of populism, and he understands that his government will be the difference between it succeeding or not. That is encouraging. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.